Hey, que la que hay, mi gente, es Rocky here from SpeakSpanishFaster.com y en el video de hoy yo le quiero contar mi historia de cómo aprendí español. Today I want to tell you my story about how I learned Spanish because if you go on our website, SpeakSpanishFaster.com, I've been getting a lot of questions about this, but people want to know, like, how did I learn Spanish? Because I'm not I'm not a native Spanish speaker. Spanish is actually my second language. But I am Puerto Rican, so there's kind of this mix where people assume I either grew up speaking Spanish and that I was just handed, like, I'm just lucky I learned Spanish as a kid because I'm Puerto Rican. I am Puerto Rican, but I didn't speak Spanish when I was growing up. So I want to tell you the whole story because I really think it can help you learn Spanish faster. All right, and that's my job here, is to get you speaking Spanish faster, right? So let's kind of get into the story, get into the background of the story, and hopefully this story can give you hope and give you some motivation to go out and continue to keep practicing so that you can learn Spanish. So as I said, I am Puerto Rican, but my dad, my family, they're from New York City. So my dad's actually from the Bronx. They call us New Yorkers or New Yorkino is what they say sometimes in Spanish, but they're Puerto Ricans from New York. So my dad grew up in New York City, like I said, in the Bronx. My grandmother, she's from El Viejo San Juan. She's from Old San Juan in Puerto Rico. So my grandmother is from Puerto Rico. She moved here when she was about 13, 14 years old. I can't remember, but her first language is Spanish. And then, like I said, my dad and all his brothers and sisters, they grew up in New York City, and they speak Spanish, but it's not like they don't only speak Spanish to each other. It's mostly English. So when I was growing up, it was mostly English in the house. Even though my dad speaks Spanish, my aunts and uncles speak Spanish. My generation, like myself, my sisters, my cousins, we didn't grow up speaking Spanish to each other in the house. It's kind of like if you're Spanish and you're watching this, or you know somebody that Spanish is watching this, you'll know that a lot of Spanish kids, especially like young Puerto Rican kids, whether they're growing up in New York or other parts of America, when we grow up, we don't really like speaking Spanish. Like, our grandparents will speak it to us, our parents may speak it to us, but we always respond in English. As a matter of fact, a few months ago, I was at my friend, I was at their house, and they speak Spanish, but their kids don't speak Spanish. They understand it though, and they can speak it, I guess you can say, but she said something to them in Spanish, and the kid was like, "Mom, stop speaking Spanish. We live in America. Speak English." And I feel like that's the type of mentality I had when I was growing up with Spanish, because I wasn't good at it, right? And we don't like doing things we're not good at. We don't like being out of our comfort zone. So my grandmother, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, and she spoke Spanish most of the time, but I always responded in English. So I always understood Spanish, but I couldn't speak it to save my life. My accent was terrible. My accent still isn't perfect by any means. But yeah, my accent was very bad, and I didn't know a lot of words. Like, I just couldn't speak Spanish well. You know, I could understand it perfectly, just I couldn't speak it well. Now, to add on to this, I have aunts that are Puerto Rican, and they married Dominican men, so I have Dominican cousins. And so I've always grown up around Puerto Rican and Dominican Spanish. Okay, so when did I actually really start to practice and learn Spanish? Well, when I was 14 years old, my cousin moved from Puerto Rico. My cousin Kevin, he moved from Puerto Rico to the United States. Now, when he moved here, he didn't speak any English. Like, he didn't speak any English. All he spoke was Spanish. And I didn't speak any Spanish. But at least I could understand Spanish. He couldn't even understand English. So the only way I could communicate with Kevin was through Spanish. So I had to really force myself to try to speak Spanish. And yes, Kevin always made fun of me for my Spanish. In one of my recent videos, I talked about how he made fun of me. And I gave one story about how he made fun of me. But, you know, it wasn't like a mean making fun of. It was kind of a fun type of playful way. Now, the only English words Kevin knew were curse words. That was it. So it was always funny, but whenever we had real talks, I would have to try my best to speak Spanish to him so that he could understand. Eventually, because he moved to the States, he ended up learning English fairly quickly, but it allowed me to keep working on my Spanish, but I was not good at Spanish, all right? Now, after it's kind of like, so Kevin came that year, went to school in our area, and we hung out all the time and we became really close. So after school that year, that summer, I think I was 15 years old, I went to Puerto Rico with him. This was like my second time going to Puerto Rico, but it was my first time hanging out like extensively with Kevin, because I have a lot of family in Puerto Rico. I don't even know how many cousins and stuff I have. So every time I go to Puerto Rico, I meet a new family member. So I had been to Puerto Rico before, but I had never even met Kevin. And that just goes to show, like, he lived in a whole different part of the island and we just never met. So long story short, this time I went to Puerto Rico with my grandma and Kevin. So I hung out, of course, like, I didn't want to hang out with my grandma. I wanted to hang out with Kevin. So he took me back to where he grew up and we hung out with some of his friends. And that's where, like, a lot of his friends would make fun of me and make fun of my Spanish. And, of course, Kevin was a jokester. Like, he didn't mean any harm by it, but he would make fun of it, too. And they would make fun of my Spanish. So, obviously, it didn't feel good. I was embarrassed to talk it, especially at that moment. I remember one time being on a beach. We were on a beach, and a lady asked me to build a hole. Not a hole, but at the beach in the sand to, like, pretty much make a hole. And she asked me she asked for the shovel, and I didn't even know what the word for shovel was at the time. And she was like, "Tú no hablas español?" And I said, yo hablo un poquito. And then she was like, I speak English, don't worry. Like, but yeah, you need to learn Spanish if you want to get around here and blah, blah. So it was pretty much like my self-esteem was really, really low in that moment. All right. So that really sucked. And it was like, man, I can't wait to go home because this is pissing me off. All right, so when I got home, me and Kevin, we flew back, and my grandma, we flew back, and I came home, and I really decided, like, you know what? I'm going to take Spanish serious. I was taking Spanish classes in school, but of course I didn't take it serious. And I was like, I'm going to take Spanish in school. I'm going to take Spanish serious in school. And I quickly learned that didn't do anything because the way they were teaching me Spanish in school wasn't helping me at all. So it's like, all right, I got to take matters into my own hands. Of course, I will say I had the luxury of being around Spanish, growing up around Spanish. I knew a lot of words. I knew the pronunciations, and having to talk to Kevin every day in Spanish gave me an advantage that a lot of people don't have. So I'm not going to act like I didn't have any advantages when learning Spanish. I did, but I didn't, like I said, didn't grow up speaking Spanish from a baby. All right. So from that moment, I really started focusing on my Spanish, and I started doing everything possible I could to speak Spanish. Now, keep in mind, because I'm Puerto Rican, and I grew up with, Puerto Rican cousins and Dominican cousins, like, that was really the only Spanish I knew. Now, of course, in school, I had, like, friends that were from, or Mexican or El Salvadorian, but I always thought they talked funny because, to me, Spanish was the way Puerto Ricans talked. All right, so when I was learning Spanish, I was focused on learning Puerto Rican Spanish or Caribbean Spanish, we could say. So that's kind of how I picked up and really focused on that accent. Like, it would make no sense for me to try to learn a Mexican accent when my family's Puerto Rican. So, and I was surrounded by Puerto Rican Spanish, so that's kind of what stuck with me. But when I started really focusing on trying to learn Spanish, the one thing I do, I listen to a lot of Puerto Rican reggaeton music. And I also, back then at that time, when they had a lot of the Puerto Rican musicians on their albums, they would have these long interludes or long intros where they would just be talking, or they would have somebody talking. For example, on Daddy Yankee's album, Talento de Barrio. Now, on that album, Daddy Yankee would have, like, on the intro, it was like an intro talking. Interlude was a guy named Gavilan. He was talking. It's kind of like giving a speech. At the end, there was more talking from Daddy Yankee. Now, keep in mind, at the time, when in Puerto Rico, reggaeton was really frowned upon by the government and stuff. So a lot of these artists would use their albums to speak out against the government and to tell their stories, not just through the music, but also just through dialogue. So what I would do is I would listen to those albums, and keep in mind, at the time we didn't have YouTube and stuff. So I would have my dad print off the lyrics for me from, like, those dialogues. Of course, some of the songs too, because I wanted to learn the songs, but more so the dialogues. And what I would do is I would take these long 3 to 5 minute dialogues and I would just listen to it over and over, and I would imitate exactly how Gavilan or there was another guy named Gallego who would do these same type of interludes or intros for albums. And I would copy those and try to sound just like them. I would try to pronounce the words just like them. And, you know, over time, my Spanish would just get better and better. And of course, it helped. I was still talking to Kevin every day. And I started getting confident in my Spanish, and I stopped being afraid. And Kevin, slowly but surely, that's how I knew my Spanish was getting better, because he made less and less fun of me. And that's when I started, like I said, get more confident in my Spanish. And I pretty much in a few months, like, I was talking straight to Kevin in Spanish after that. So that's pretty much how I learned Spanish. Now, there's some things that I really want to point out that can help you with your Spanish, and that's really going to help you learn the type of Spanish you could say that you want to learn. Now, when it comes to learning Spanish, we know that there are so many different types of Spanish. We have Caribbean Spanish, we have Latin American Spanish. These are broad categories. I mean, Puerto Rican Spanish is different than Dominican Spanish, it's different than Cuban Spanish. Even within the Dominican Republic, and I used to live in the Dominican Republic, in Santiago, they call them cibaeño, where we talk with la I. So, por ejemplo, in North Dominican Republic, and I might do a video on Dominican Spanish, but in the north of the Dominican Republic, they say, hablamos con la I. So instead of saying hablar, we say hablai, jugai. I remember I used to play basketball there, and people would say, vamos jugai, instead of saying vamos a jugar or vamos a jugar. So it just goes to show that's just within the Dominican Republic. In the north, they talk different than the middle, than the center, or Santo Domingo, where I have some cousins and I have uncles in Santo Domingo, and they talk different than in Santiago, and they talk different than the people del sur, and the people in the south of the Dominican Republic. They really like to roll their R's. So instead of using it, they do the backwards of Puerto Rico. So instead of using L for an R, they would use R for an L. So instead of saying capital, they say capitar. So that just goes to show you, within one country, there's many different there's many different dialects or accents, not accents, but dialects of Spanish. Now, that's just in the Dominican Republic. Then we have Puerto Rico. I never lived in Puerto Rico, but I've been there many times. I have family there, like I said. People talk different depending on which part of Puerto Rico you're in, whether you're in the city or you're in El Campo, or you're in the south of Puerto Rico. And then, you know, that's just then. Then you could talk about Colombia. People in Bogota talk different than people from Medellin. So within Colombia, everybody talks different. So that's the crazy thing about Spanish, is you have so many different accents, so many different variations. There's really no one special way to speak Spanish. There's no one right way. No matter where you're, like I said in my story, when I was growing up, I thought Spanish was the way Puerto Rican and Dominicans talked. I didn't think, like, if I heard a Mexican talk, I was like, that sounds funny. If I heard an El Salvadorian person talk, I thought that sounded funny, because it was different to me. Now, of course, somebody from Spain might think, oh, Puerto Rican Spanish, that's not real Spanish. Or somebody from Colombia might say, oh, Spain Spanish, that sounds weird. We don't like that type of Spanish. Or somebody from Argentina might say, no, we speak real Spanish. So no matter where you go, the thing about Latinos is that we are very prideful, especially Puerto Ricans. We even have Puerto Rican Day Parade in New York City, and it's huge, right? It's very popular. We are very, very prideful. We think, well, our way is the way. So to sum this up, what I want you to understand is that when it comes to learning the Spanish you want to learn, it's important to learn one type of Spanish. Because when I was learning Spanish, if I would have been trying to talk from Spain and Colombia all at once, I would have never found my way of speaking Spanish. Now people say, like, if I go to the Dominican Republic, they say, oh, you talk Puerto Rican. If I go to Puerto Rico, they say, why do you talk Dominican? If I'm in New York, they're like, man, you sound like a New Yorkino. You talk como Dominicano, como Boricua. It's like a mix. Like my Spanish is like a mix of everything. Because like I said, I used to live in the Dominican Republic in Santiago. So I would say, a veces, si yo estoy hablando con los dominicanos, mi acento es más dominicano. Pero, si estoy hablando con los boricuas, mi español sale más como los boricuas. But as a teacher, I also feel that I have to speak more on a neutral level as well. So I have to have como, I don't want to say more perfect Spanish, but como más neutro. Like, for example, on the news, they talk perfect Spanish, right? They pronounce all the words, they roll all the R's, they say all the S's. But that's because they have to speak a Spanish that appeals to everybody. But if these people were at home, they probably wouldn't talk like that. All right? So there's always going to be different types of Spanish, different types of ways you can say things. When you're starting to learn Spanish, find a way that's for you, that you are passionate about, because learning Spanish is all about something that you are very passionate about, that you're going to want to stay consistent with. And for me, I had that family bond. Like, I want to be able to go to Puerto Rico y poder hablar con mi familia. I wanted to be able to talk to my family there in Puerto Rico. I want to be able to go to the Dominican Republic and fit in and not have the people look at me funny or say, oh, your Spanish sucks and stuff like that. That's what pushed me. I had that desire deep down inside. If you don't have that desire, you're not going to stick with the language that you're trying to learn. A lot of times we build that desire, that connection through the language and through the country. So if you have this strong connection to Colombia, then you're going to want to speak Colombian Spanish. And no other Spanish is going to matter to you but that Spanish. Now, when you learn that Spanish, at the end of the day, Spanish is Spanish. You will be able to talk with other people from different countries, right? I go to Spain and I can speak perfectly fine with the people. I have a friend that I get on calls with every weekend. He's a teacher in Spain, and we talk. I just pick his brain every now and then, and we understand each other perfectly. I go to Colombia, get along perfectly with people. I have friends from, like I said, El Salvador, Mexico. We all understand each other. Yes, we have different words for different things, but we all understand each other. So at the end of the day, Spanish is Spanish. It doesn't matter what type of Spanish you use or that you learn. The reason why I use a more neutral Spanish sometimes on YouTube, I'm getting more lazy because, let's say this, neutral Spanish for me is like a job. Like, I have to really focus on saying all the letters properly and not cutting my S's and rolling all my R's, because the rest of the day, only on these videos do I even use neutral Spanish, or in my programs, because I want to teach Spanish as Spanish and I don't want to have any, what's the right word here? I don't want to have any bias. Like, if somebody's learning Spanish from me, I don't only want to teach them like Puerto Rican Spanish. I want to teach them Spanish as Spanish and let them choose the dialect they choose to learn. But when I'm talking with my friends, family, I'm talking fast. I'm cutting letters. I'm using L's instead of R's. I'm saying, instead of hablado, I'm saying hablao. Ten cuidado. I'm talking like that when I talk with my friends. So that's how I speak Spanish. And then, so, 24/7, I'm talking that type of Spanish. And then when I get on videos, I have to speak a more neutral Spanish, I feel, at times. But I will say, with YouTube, I get more comments and people say, man, forget all that neutral stuff. We'll hear that on Univision. We want to hear Puerto Rican Spanish. Or we want to hear just how you talk Spanish. So I will say I'm getting more comfortable on camera talking how I really talk. I know this was a long video. I kind of went off on a tangent there. But hey, we're kind of on lockdown from the whole coronavirus stuff. And I have plenty of time to shoot a video, and you have plenty of time to watch a video. But I really want to just break it down to you, how I learned Spanish, how it can help you, some of the things that you can do. For instance, you can, one of the methods I love to teach is this imitation of listening to interviews from people and trying to imitate the way that they say things. But do it in a way that is the person or the style of Spanish you want to learn. So if you want to learn Spanish, don't spend your time imitating Puerto Rican Spanish interviews, right? Focus on that Spanish that you want to learn. Focus on that one dialect, that one accent that you want to learn. Dive into that whole world. If you want to learn or Dominican Spanish, go to the Dominican Republic, visit there, so that you can feel the culture, and that will help you understand more. I'm not saying you have to spend months there, but it's always good to go because that'll help you build a more passion towards that language. And then watch nothing but interviews in Dominican Spanish. It's very easy to find that. Just put Dominican rapper interview or Dominican news, and you'll start to go down rabbit holes and find the type of Spanish that you want to see. Look up different artists that are popular. Like if you want to learn Spanish from Medellin, then you might look up J Balvin, who's a famous singer from Medellin, and watch all his interviews and copy him. Of course, in the trap music, there's tons of Puerto Rican famous artists. You know, if you can look up any of these artists, Bad Bunny, Anuel, Ozuna, De La Ghetto. There's many artists that you could just watch all their interviews and copy the way they talk. And eventually, you'll start talking like that. And be proud of the accent of the Spanish that you learn. Don't let people deter you. You know, you're going to face criticism from Spanish speakers from other countries that might say, these are really just, honestly, you probably don't even have to pay these people any mind, pay attention to these people. Because like I said, the people that I talk to, that I'm friends with in all different countries, they don't even say anything about my Spanish. I don't say anything about their Spanish. We know we're from different places. That's just how we talk. But if anybody criticizes you for your Spanish because it's different, just don't pay them any mind. They just really don't have, you know, anything better to do. Because I'm sure if you listen to their Spanish, you would say, I don't like that Spanish. That Spanish doesn't sound good to me. That's not the way I like to hear Spanish. So, you know, like I said, the type of Spanish, the perfect Spanish, the right way to speak Spanish is totally subjective to each individual. And yeah, with that being said, take this video, use it, use some of the ideas I expressed in this video to help you learn Spanish, like listening to interviews, going back through imitating those interviewers or the people being interviewed, listening to lyrics, reciting lyrics of songs and of trying to sound just like the people, and having a passion and not being afraid, because when I look back at my whole story of how I learned Spanish, where things took a change was a few reasons. One, I made the conscious decision to learn Spanish, and there was going to be nothing that was going to stop me from learning Spanish. That's number one. Number two, I took it serious. Like, I think for the longest, Spanish for me was just this passive thing. And then when I said, you know what, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to really apply myself to this. You know, that's the two. Number three, is I got over the fear. I got over of worrying about if my cousins or if other people were going to make fun of me, and I just started speaking Spanish. And sure, I still make mistakes today when I speak Spanish. Like I said, Spanish is my second language. But the cool thing, at least I will say, is I went to school. Like I still love Spanish. Every single day I'm trying to speak it better and better, and I'm trying to learn it better and better. I went to school, graduated with a degree in Spanish. I've worked as a translator. So I have a long history with Spanish, and it's something I love, and that's the passion I have for it. And it's the same. I'm not saying you'll have to have that same passion if you want to learn, but you're going to have a certain type of passion to learn any language, because I'm not going to say it's going to take you forever to learn it. If you put in the work, you can learn really fast. Yes, I did have an advantage over many people because I grew up hearing it, but it only took me a few months to become fluent in Spanish. And that's because I made it a primary focus and I was passionate about making it happen. Now, even if you're starting from scratch, I really think you can learn to speak a language quickly if you apply yourself every single day. And again, the only way that happens is if you have a passion for that language, if you have a passion for Spanish. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you want more tips and tricks on how you can learn to speak Spanish faster, fluently, click the first link in the comments. That's going to take you to a little article I wrote, and I pretty much break down my 3 biggest secrets that will help you learn Spanish faster. It's a pretty good article, I must say. I've gotten a ton of great feedback on it, and that's actually what made me want to tell my stories, because I get a lot of questions from people like, hey, can you go more in depth in the story because I tell a little of the story in that 3 Secrets free training. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, I'm sorry again it was a little long today, but if you enjoyed it, do me a big favor, hit the thumbs up, comment below, let me know what else you need help with, let me know what else you want me to talk about, anything else. You know I'm here to help you speak Spanish faster, hence the name of the channel. And last but not least, please do not forget to subscribe to this channel, Speak Spanish Faster. Until next time, nos vemos.